This didn't actually happen to me, but it happened to my mom when she was a teenager. My mom is now in her mid-60s. She's not an overly religious woman. She doesn't read the Bible regularly, rarely goes to church, but she prays every night, since that is what gives her comfort. I'll have to side note this with, I watch normal horror movies with her every so often, nothing too crazy or gore, but spooky sort of stuff. Well, I asked her if she wanted to watch The Exorcist, and she flat out 100% refused. She said there is absolutely no way she will ever watch anything related to possession or exorcisms. Well, this made me curious. So the movie Constantine comes out and I show her the trailer asking her if she wants to watch it. She sees the girl near the beginning climbing the ceiling and just refuses, again. I should also note, my mother will refuse and kick you out of her house if you even think about bringing a Ouija board into the house. She'll yell, scream and cuss until you drop the subject. I ended up asking her why exactly she refuses to watch those sort of movies. Well, she tells me when she was a teenager, at a sleepover at a friend's house, they were up playing games, the parents watching TV. Her friends and herself are on the floor playing a board game, a game my mom has never played before. Well, come to find out it's a Ouija board and she doesn't know what it does. Well, they start playing, asking a bunch of questions. They end up finding out there is a spirit in the house, so they ask it to show itself. Nothing happens, they demand it to show itself. This was her first indication something wasn't right, because the lights all around the house, every single room, went out immediately, including the TV, and then snapped right back on. Spooky, huh? Can't just be a fluke. Right. They ask the next question, who are you? The piece moves round the board in big circles with their hands on it, and stops at the letter D. Moves to the letter E, then to the letter V-I-L. Wow, someone must be messing with it, they thought. This can't be real, so they ask, if you are the devil, then show yourself. Nothing happens for a while, and then suddenly the TV goes out. Well, in the reflection in the TV sitting in the living room next to them, my mom and her friends, even her parents, could make out the shape of something terrifying just sitting there, next to them. The house got extremely cold. Suddenly loud noises could be heard in the kitchen, stuff flying off the top of the refrigerator, and cupboards opening and closing. They immediately stopped the game, closed it up and threw it in the trash, never to play again. Later that night, my mom is sound asleep and is awoken by something loud and clanging on the roof. She listens intently, and she can hear what sounds like chains and dogs up on the roof. Well, that's not possible, it must be outside somewhere. She wakes up the next morning and goes and talks to her friends' parents, asks them if any of their neighbors have any dogs. They tell her no. And they tell her they also heard the dogs and chains up on the roof last night. So that's the story of why my mom refuses to watch anything that involves exorcisms. She truly believes that the devil was there with them that night, sitting next to them. And the messed up thing is, every time she tells me that story, I get this cold shiver down my spine that there is no way she would be making this up. I think I was about 14 years old when this happened. An old childhood friend moved back to my state after settling in Hawaii for a couple of years. I was so happy to see her, and of course immediately planned to have a sleepover. Unfortunately, she had moved pretty far from my area, as rent had only skyrocketed in the last 4 years she was gone. Her mom was a single mom, and she also had a younger brother, which probably didn't make it any easier. They had managed to find a house to rent that was kind of in the middle of nowhere. They were on a property with farm animals and acres of forest and fields, and the nearest neighbor was nowhere in sight. It was a 20-minute drive to the nearest town from her house, which left it kind of isolated. Anyways, I get there and we immediately decide to go camping in the backyard, just like we used to when we were next-door neighbors in the suburbs. This time it was a lot more authentic with the trees and animals that surrounded us, even if we could still see the kitchen window from where we pitched up our tent. I brought my suitcase into the tent and we set up our sleeping bags. I also had this crappy little lantern from Costco that my mom had bought me. We left all of our stuff in the tent and then went back inside to play and watch movies. As the night approached, her mom said she needed to get something. I don't really remember if she needed groceries for dinner, or if she was going to pick up the younger brother, but the two of us assured her we were fine on our own, and she ended up leaving for a while. Of course, we were excited when she left. I pulled out the candy that I had brought, and we queued up some movies that we weren't allowed to watch. I believe it was The Hangover. We ended up watching 2 movies, and before we knew it, it was 1 a.m. The living room we were in was right next to the front door, a wall of windows with crappy plastic blinds offering a lot of natural light in daytime. All of the lights were on inside the house. It made us feel safer since we could see everything around us. But it also made seeing outside into the pitch dark impossible. We started up our 3rd movie of the night, and it was kind of an unspoken agreement that the camping idea was out and that we were probably just going to fall asleep on our nest of blankets on the couch. But before we could get too comfortable, her dog started barking. My friend was kind of annoyed but also confused, because her dog was normally pretty quiet. Her dog started running around barking, and after a couple of minutes we managed to get her to quiet down. She was a small dog, and we wrapped her up with us in the blankets. We continued our movie for another 5 minutes before there was a loud knock at the door. Me and my friend froze. We looked at each other, confused as to who it could be. We didn't see her mom's car pull into the driveway, and with how dark it was impossible to miss. Again, we were in the middle of nowhere, 2 14-year-old girls alone. We paused the movie and just listened for a minute. I got up slowly, trying to be as quiet as possible, and tiptoed over to the front door. It was unlocked, and with a quick glance behind me, I could see that the back door was open. I was starting to freak out. I locked the deadbolt, and not a second later did the knock start again, but louder and more violent. I screamed at my friend to call the police and ran with all my might to get to the back door, slamming it shut and tried to lock it. Her back door was kind of jerry-rigged to shut, and I struggled to lock it for a good 2 minutes. Longest 2 minutes of my life. After I locked the front and back door, I ran to the lights and turned all of them off, and then I finally got the courage to look outside. I peered through the plastic blinds at the front of the house, and could see nothing but darkness. Another round of aggressive knocking and I literally dropped to the floor, so scared I couldn't even think. I just wanted to hide. I just wanted to make sure I was out of sight. I watched from the ground, peeking my head around the couch as the knob to the front door twisted halfway and jerked. The door rattled as someone yanked it and tried to get in. I felt a hand on my foot, and it took all my willpower to not scream. It was my friend. She brought her finger to her lips and motioned for me to follow her, and the 2 of us crawled to her mom's room with the dog. The dog was going crazy now, barking and whimpering. We crawled all the way over to her mom's nightstand, and I realized with a cold feeling in my stomach that her phone was dead, and that mine was still in our tent. It took a good 3 minutes before her phone turned on, and we immediately called the police. A very nice woman answered our call and told us to stay on the line. It was going to be 15 minutes before police arrived. At this point the knocking had stopped, and after 5 minutes of sitting in her mom's room I gathered the courage to go back to the living room. I double-checked the locks on the front door, and went to go double-check the back. As I walked to the back door, however, I noticed there was a light outside. I ran to the kitchen window and could feel my blood turn to ice. The lantern in our tent was on, and I could see the silhouette of a large man going through my suitcase. I called out to my friend and she told me to get away from the window, which I reluctantly did. Soon after we could hear the police sirens in the distance, red and blue lights flashing through the plastic blinds. There were 3 police cars and an officer immediately ran towards us. I shouted that the man was around the corner, and apparently it was a foot chase that ended with the guy escaping into the forest. My friend's mom had also arrived home minutes after the police, and said that she actually turned back from where she was going because she had gotten a horrible feeling that we weren't safe. She said that mother's intuition told her to turn around, and that when she pulled into the house with police cars she was terrified, but glad that we were safe. I thank God or whatever is out there that we decided to stay in for a movie night instead of camping. I don't know if that man wanted to hurt us or rob us. In fact, none of my stuff or phone was stolen from the tent, but I have a feeling it would have been a very different story if we had done anything differently. I also didn't tell my mom that any of this happened, and she heard about it like a week later from my friend's mom. She was super pissed that I didn't tell her, but I didn't want her to worry. When I was about 8 to 9 years old, we lived in a house that my father built for us in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. My parents owned a small business that often brought clients to our remote little homestead, and over the years, we met some rather odd people. One such person was a strange man that gave me the creeps as soon as I saw him. He arrived at our home in a black car with tinted windows, wearing all black, with a black hat and dark sunglasses. His demeanor was very strange, and he was very interested in our black Persian cat named Mercedes. Nevertheless, he left after his consultation with my parents, but later at dinner, everyone admitted that he set them on edge. That night, Mercedes came down very ill. A few days later, after an illness, the local vet couldn't diagnose what included the cat vomiting up gobs of what appeared to be black tar. Mercedes died. In her final moments, she would swat and hiss at something in the air. I'll never forget the chill I got when she took her last breath. After this, many strange things began happening around our home. We'd find footprints in the snow that started and stopped out of nowhere, noises in the middle of the night, the wallpaper would be torn halfway off the walls. My mother, who has always been somewhat of a sensitive person, claimed to start seeing demonic creatures around the house and became rather withdrawn. I had asthma, but had been a long while without an attack. Soon after all of this began happening, I started having episodes again. I was very sick one night, so I slept on the floor next to my mother's side of the bed in my parents' bedroom. Under their bed and around there were a bunch of boxes, family photos, wrapping paper, etc., things that we'd been meaning to store elsewhere. In the middle of the night, I had a particularly bad asthma attack. I heard my mother wake up screaming, "Get away from her," and trying to get to me. Every box from under the bed and around the room had been stacked between where I lay on the floor and my mother's side of the bed, preventing her from getting to me. She finally reached me and gave me my inhaler, and she cried all night. She never told me what she saw that night, but strange things continued to happen for several more months. We had the house blessed and tried everything we could. Eventually, the activity started to slow. My brother and his family live in the house now, and they hear unexplainable sounds every so often, but nothing like what happened that winter. I grew up to be quite a skeptic, but I still can't explain what happened that year. I just tell myself it was all in our heads.